So prior to that, control room, can we bring up our guest's webpage? I want to put that on screen while I bring him to the stage. Our guest this evening, by the way, is going to be Richard Gage, AIA. He's a 30-year San Francisco Bay architect and a member of the American Institute of Architects. He's the founder and former CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. You might have heard of that. He's now flying solo with his new podcast, Richard Gage, 9/11 Unleashed, continuing to speak the truth about 9/11 and interview very interesting people who have a little information that might be useful for the listening audience. So I was on his show, was it last Thursday, Richard? You can come to the stage. How you doing? Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, your mic's a little overdriven. We'll turn it down a little bit. Let's see.
Overdriven mic. That's terrible.
Oh, right about there. That's getting in the sweet spot right there.
How's that?
Yeah, we didn't have a fancy sound check with you. Maybe we're going to work that into our professional end. Yeah, so that's been a thing. Good to see you. How you doing?
You too, my friend. It's really good.
And I just got to speak with you a couple days ago.
I know, but there's so much to talk about, Richard.
And now I get to ask the questions.
Yeah, I was pounding you with questions the other day. We wanted to learn all about autonomy on our side, and I'm here to help you learn about what you want to learn about on your side. But let's definitely touch base on what we see. 9/11 Con, the new Pentagon conference coming up next weekend. That's what we launched yesterday and today. It's very exciting for us.
I'm excited about it too. We're kind of co-sponsoring with you to help people know about it and maybe even show up to it. And I clicked through your email today and I sent you some feedback. You had good copywriting, good graphics, all the links work, good calls to action, very professional. And, for folks at home who might not be familiar with your whole story, no, I'm just kidding. I first met you back in 2008 and I had the privilege of, I'll unfold it for the audience like this. I was learning how to make films. I just learned how to podcast. I'm teaching myself how to get cameras and get the red dot and get things in focus. And I got a couple cameras and some tripods. And I hear that Richard Gage is speaking a couple hours away from me. I live in Hartford. He was speaking in Boston. I said, I could probably make a drive there. So I go up to MIT and I've never been to MIT before. And we didn't have Waze and these things back then. So I got lost a couple of times. I'm rushing to get to the place, carrying all this equipment in there. I set it up. The audience fills up. So I'm at the back of this like slanted auditorium like they have at colleges. And Mr. Gage is down front and he's getting set up and the audience is getting all full of people from MIT. And I'm surrounded by all this big brain power. And he goes into his presentation and I got various angles I'm filming. And he asked this question to the audience: how many people believe the official story? And everyone puts their hands up. I was like, okay, so that's what we're dealing with here. A bunch of people who just believe what they heard on TV or whatever. Yeah. And at the end of the presentation, the most impressive thing that stuck with me was that when you asked the question at the end, nobody's hand went up. That you had logically walked them through. And then there's also that conference. There was a conference that weekend. Was it the AIA conference there? And I was doing some filming there and people were asking you about, your presentation and things like that. That was a good time. It was a good experience for me back then. And you've remained amazingly consistent over the years. And here we are in 2022. And most people still don't know anything about World Trade Center 7 or anything. So there's still a meaning and a need for that message that you've been carrying. And that bucket that you've got doesn't have any holes in it. So you still got the whole thing. In fact, it's gotten better with like the Halsey research and these other things that have come together. So however you want to unfold your, evolution of what you've been working on and the craft that you've made of explaining really complex architecture in ways that the everyday person, if they just, pay attention, can understand some of the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey for 15 years. I've been putting out the explosive destruction of the 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers on 9/11. And I'm still doing that, though my career has shifted quite substantially from being at and in the organization that I nurtured, having founded 15 years ago, and now moving on my own. And that's a story people can learn more about. We won't go into the gory details. and they are gory. But you can learn more at the website richardgage911.org. And what you'll learn is that I am unleashed. I do have a podcast I run with my wife, and we interview all kinds of people in addition to esteemed guests like you, Richard Grove, and John Perkins is coming up. Michael Hoffman is coming up, and Foster Gamble is coming up for me, like he just visited you. We do 2 podcasts a week, and we're putting it out there. And now we've been preparing for this conference, 9/11 Con. Get it? Con for conference, con for con job.
Well, I also like you had the, it's at the Pentagon. The Pentagon's in the logo. There's, you're just tipping the hat toward, hey, check this out. It might be interesting.
Yeah.
And there might be more to it than you thought. Yeah, exactly. I thought it was good framing. Thanks. How did that come together?
Well, I said, we got to do a conference. There's so many things we can do. We can do Shanksville. What happened there? The planes, what happened there? The hijackers, what happened there? The financial crimes of 9/11 are extraordinary. The media censorship is a whole set of stories in and of itself. And the government propaganda and lack of response to the truth. The family members, we could go anywhere, but there's a great controversy in the 9/11 truth movement about the Pentagon. Most people, I think, in the 9/11 truth movement believe that that no plane hit the Pentagon. But there are those who believe a missile hit the Pentagon. There are those who believe a plane flew over the Pentagon. There are those who believe a plane flew near approaching it and blew up outside the Pentagon. There are those who believe that a plane, 757, did hit the Pentagon and went into the damaged section of the building there. So we're going to have those major speakers, presenters. Actually, they each of them have an hour and a half to present, starting with Barbara Honegger, and then Thierry Masson. We found him. He was hiding in France. No, he wasn't hiding. He's been very active in other truth movements for 20 years. We're bringing him back. He wrote the first books on the Pentagon and 9/11 Big Lies in 2002. And since, these became an international sensation. They were translated in like more than 8 languages. He got the 9/11 truth movement on a firm footing. And some would say, there were some early errors thereon, and we're going to get to the heart of that. And then after he goes, we have Craig McKee and Adam Ruff, a team highlighting the citizens investigation team theory that a plane flew over the Pentagon. And then we have David Chandler and Wayne Costa, who will present the evidence that they claim shows clearly that a plane hit the Pentagon. So all of this is 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. We've got 12 hours. The presenters will be questioned by the other presenters for the half hour after their 1.5 hour presentation. And then at the end, there's 2 hours where all the presenters can take questions from the public. So we're expecting hundreds and hundreds in this virtual live stream online conference. And we'll all be running it here from richardgage911.org. And so you can find out all about it and register for those of you who want to come. Encourage you to at richardgage911.org. So join us. It's going to be really quite an event.
All right. So I didn't find out about Thierry's work until later. Isn't he Canadian? Am I thinking of the right person? French. He's French.
In fact, he'll have a translator.
I thought maybe he was Quebec French. That's maybe what my problem was back in the day. So maybe I don't know, 2004, 2005, around the same time that I discovered like David Ray Griffin was publishing on this, and there were other people like that. And then Barbara Honegger has been an investigative journalist for many decades. She's very well experienced. So I'm interested to see what her presentation. I met her in like 2006, so I have an idea, but she's also evolved. The citizens information, the CIT, the journalists that got all the like 93 video camera, like they're interesting too. They went to the gas stations and interviewed people. I remember watching some of their stuff as they were making it years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, all right. So I don't have a belief or an opinion on it, but I do have some facts that are relevant to it, and keep these in your pocket. So the day before 9/11, Rumsfeld came out and said there was $2.3 trillion unaccounted for, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that the part of the building had accountants the next day that blew up.
Yep.
So there's an article from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by Milan Samovich, and it talks about the accountants in that wing. So they were doing the investigation. The accountants that were working on that to find missing money got hit that day. So that was one thing that stuck with me. The other is there are some photographs. You have to look at the photographs in chronological order from that day. If you look at photographs of that site 45 minutes into it, it's all fallen in. But when you look at the photographs, when the smoke is, when it's just starting, you can see I hate to laugh about it, but there's one of the photos I'm thinking of specifically where the window is like the building is cut into, it's just sliced, like someone sliced it with a knife, and everything in the offices is set. Like there's a book open on a stool. You can see everything in the picture as if something just sliced through this building and the rest of it came down. And then this other part falls and really obscures the scene. But I remember looking at some of the early photos from that and thinking, this seems really odd that the claim is Flight 77 disappeared in this building. And when you look at the early photos, that doesn't seem to be possible. And when I coupled that with the pilots for 9/11 Truth and their data, and I used to get their CDs and DVDs and see what the latest was, that they could not in a simulator even do the thing that was claimed, let alone have a pilot that doesn't know how to do it that day and execute like that. So there was so many, like as Morpheus would say, splinters in the mind. Once you start looking into like, there's a lot of contradictions. That's what that splinter in the mind metaphor is anyway. It's a contradiction. Yeah. There's a lot of contradictions. I mean, even when they came out with, here's the videotape of the thing we claim flying through it, it's just a blur. There's no identification of anything. That's the first thing in logic. I mean, Tony's a logic professor and we can break it open for a second, my co-host, but you would start with the things that exist in the law of identification, then understand how those pieces fit together. And then you would get to the how or the use case of what actually happened. So in the case of the Pentagon, there's a lot of pieces, individual pieces of grammar. What is the Pentagon? Who runs it? Who pays for it? Who reinforced that side of the building with bunker buster proof type of defenses that might have been tested that day in a practical application of some sort? These sick people who make up Operation Northwoods type of plans. Right. So there's a lot to that. So I'm super interested to hear at least these four perspectives. And I wasn't even aware. You're right. There are a lot of different theories of what happened there, because the data that could show us beyond reasonable doubt traditionally is made national security top secret. And that's what has all people trying to fill in the blanks with, maybe this happened, maybe this happened. Because, the media and the people that are in authority haven't told us the truth. It creates that room for doubt. And then they just label anyone who tries to hypothesize or fill in that blank a conspiracy theorist, instead of, these are smart people who recognize there's pieces of the data set that are missing and they should try to put it together.
Or they manipulate those communities by sort of implanting different theories that are just not well grounded,
or cause friction with other groups.
Exactly. They sort of divide and conquer those groups that are attempting to find the truth. And then to your point, Richard Gage, Richard, you said something. I'm sorry, you both are named Richard. So I'm gonna call you Mr. Gage. I'll call you Richard, so I don't get confused here. So Mr. Gage, I just have a quick question. I love the dialectic. I like actually getting all of the evidence from all these different perspectives out on the table in one 12-hour span, sort of marathon, if you will. I'm tempted to ask you what your opinion is, but before we even get that far, what gave you the incentive, the insight, and the ability to, with your knowledge, being an architect, to allow for such an open dialectic to occur, knowing that this is probably one of the biggest issues, having worked with Rich for 10 years is seeing the divide and conquer that has happened with people becoming so ideologically possessed by it has to have been this or that in regards to, well, it was a plane or no planes, it was bombs, it was micro nukes, it was directed. I mean, there's so many different theories, and it's become such a dividing source in that community, which has been frustrating from our angle, working together, trying to find the truth of the matter. Understanding sort of the how comes, I think, to Rich's point, after we ask some of the more important questions that come beforehand, the what and the who, the where. Like, you know, what aspect of that building of the Pentagon was hit, and what was housed there as far as financial records? What are the accountants working on? Why was it reinforced? All these very strange questions that I think people sort of forget about, and then they focus on, no, it's a missile, no, it's a plane, no, it's Rocky Bullwinkle. I don't know. You know, it's just like, it becomes absurd after a while. So what's your perspective there, and what's your incentive for allowing for that open discourse?
Well, I have been constrained by a very narrow scope at AE 9/11 Truth of necessity, right, which is the World Trade Center towers. Now, what got me into trouble is that there's part of me that didn't want to be so constrained. There's part of me that wanted to speak out on the current disease that's going around. And so I did, and that's what started this series of adjustments in my professional career to where I'm now independent. And so now that I'm independent, what do I do with myself? I'm a fish out of water. I mean, it's a little bit of an ivory tower living in AE 9/11 Truth. And I got really good at what I did and what I'm continuing to do, which is to speak out on the World Trade Center. But the truth movement has a greater need than that, because I have been putting out weekly webinars for 5 years. I have given 700, 600, more than 600 certainly, presentations, and more than 600 radio interviews all around the world on those subjects. So the truth movement is well versed in the evidence for the explosive demolition, and the sets of evidence are very well defined. So, you know, the part of it is a need to not just redefine myself, but to provide some value for the 9/11 Truth movement, which is new. And so this argument, the set of arguments that have been actually somewhat vicious in the 9/11 Truth movement, between these parties, it's been very uncomfortable for me personally. I mean, I've stepped into it because for whatever reason, the truth movement, I think most of the people in it have seen AE 9/11 Truth as the tip of the spear, if you will, because it is the sharpest point to bring the to the public, to the media, to elected representatives. It's backed up by 3,500 architects and engineers. Well, what I allowed myself to do was to make a comment on the CIT Pentagon flyover theory video and interviews, and it was very impressive to me. And so then it got the kind of the whole movement in an uproar, and that was used as an endorsement of their theory and an opinion by myself, which it wasn't. It was just a reaction, an emotional reaction to some very interesting work.
And so for the benefit of the audience, is the CIT theory something like an aircraft flew toward the Pentagon, and as it was about to hit the Pentagon, there's a puff of smoke, an explosion that goes off. People add those two things together, but it flies off behind the puff of smoke out over to the ocean?
Essentially. Right. Essentially. And there's lots of contradictions within the witnesses about all of that, their own witnesses. So that will be clarified, hopefully, by Craig McKee and Adam Ruff, that team. Then I listened to Behind the Smoke Curtain, the DVD that Barbara Honegger had put out, and I was equally impressed. And that was about a plane, a fairly large plane of unknown origin, which explodes above or nearby the helipad, which is 100 yards or so from the official point of impact of the 757. And because she documents plane parts all over that area.
And there's people running with plane parts. I don't know if they're laying them down or picking them up, but it seems strange at a crime scene to see so many people acting in that way.
And we'll have an answer to that question from, I think, the David Chandler Wayne Costi group, which says that, God, we're going to, they I don't know if they cite somebody, but they did in fact create a whole lot of tents to house the Army and the different federal agencies out on the lawn. So what they say is that they were trying to preserve the evidence so that it didn't get trampled by these hundreds of agency officials. And
the official story, by the way, that we're fleeing the scene, or I mean, that's a strange story, because you would think you would want to leave that evidence sort of unperverted in some.
But let me make it more strange, because I don't know that this has been layered on yet. But it's the birthday party of the Pentagon that day. They broke ground September 11th, 1941. It's 60 years old that day. And people who work at the Pentagon know such things, right? So it's a very interesting and strange birthday party of like picking up or setting down evidence on the lawn.
Yeah. I didn't know that. Thanks, Richard. Well, so then I got in trouble for having an opinion on Behind the Smoke Curtain, which was a very, very interesting set of evidence by Barbara Honegger. And then I started listening to the Chandler Costi team and their evidence, and I was impressed by that, and I made a comment. So it's not like I've delved into this and I still can't make up my mind. I've only touched the surface of these three theories. We're going to go a lot deeper on Saturday, March 19th into each of them, including evidence that a missile hit the Pentagon, which is provided by Thierry Masson, who's coming out of 9/11 Truth retirement to share with us his original findings. So it's very exciting.
I commend you. I mean, it's because you're an architect, you having 30 years plus of expertise and engineering experience, and still your ability to have an open mind to allow different theories, especially when you're presented with evidence, specifically presented with evidence that makes you at least ask some pertinent questions. That's impressive, because sometimes people become sort of calcified or intransigent or sort of impervious to new information coming in. I don't know if that was something that sort of populated AE 9/11 over the years or something, just because I know you guys come with such a sort of focus, sort of a very sort of focalized perspective because of your engineering background into how the mechanisms behind not only the construction of the World Trade Center, but how it can then be brought down in the fashion in which we witnessed it on 9/11. I don't know if that creates a sort of intransigent situation where people are just unwilling to accept other potential possible theories as to what happened. Maybe not with the towers themselves, because you guys present by far the best evidence for the demolition, but in regards to what happened with the Pentagon or Shanksville, which we haven't really even mentioned as well, out in Pittsburgh. I have a lot of friends out that way, so I live in Pennsylvania. So.
Okay. Well, with regard to the Twin Towers, you might imagine that we have a inviolable set of a dogma of evidence that has permeated the 9/11 truth movement completely and dominated it, and that might be true, but I submit to you that everywhere I go, I get questions about directed energy weapons. I get questions about nuclear weapons destroying the towers.
Judy Woods, why the towers fell, and then Dmitry Kozalev had the micro nuke theory, but then he passed away, and I don't know if he had a published work.
Because we were trying to contact. In fact, a colleague of ours had contacted him.
Maybe it was Danny Jawenko from Controlled Demolition. Yeah, that's who I think.
He didn't just pass away. A lot of people think he was killed, his car sped up like Michael Hastings until it hit a tree. And he was killed in that accident.
That parallel is terrifying, but yeah, that's exactly.
So like Barry Jennings was like how they Terrence Yeakied Barry Jennings, and then they Michael Hastings. Okay, yeah, I see patterns.
There are patterns everywhere, but I don't look at those patterns. I mean, I have to draw the line somewhere, don't I? I mean,
to where your academic credibility. That's why it's been good, and you've stuck to your AIA certified, this thing, and you're analyzing this thing, and that's good, and you've stayed away from these other things. However, now that you're unleashed and you're able to express opinions about things that you've seen that you found to be compelling, I'm going to make an argument. It's none of these things by themselves. It's a recipe that achieves the effect of layers. It's Murder on the Orient Express. Almost everybody who could have had a chance in that thing had a chance in that thing and played some part. And that's how they keep it secret. They got people who have self-interest on that side to stay on that side. And because people are like, how do they keep it secret? I'm like, you know what national security and how many people are under that legal contract where you go to a federal prison if you break it? Like there's that layer. And then there's the blackmail layer. Then there's you're born into it layer. There's a whole bunch of layers that add up to them being able to do things like this. And Operation Gladio is 50 years of that history prior to 9/11. So there's a lot that I think you can get through to people with your podcast and the interviews you're doing. I mean, even Dave Van Kleist, I didn't listen to it yet, but In Plain Sight, 9/11 In Plain Sight, I'm pretty sure that was the first piece of 9/11 media that crossed my eyes. Oh. And I was like, what? I was literally like, what? He's taking the CNN footage and what's in the frames? What's going on here? And I'm not saying he's right. But what I'm saying is he seemed to be legitimately looking at the source material that was being purveyed by the mainstream media. And he's showing you that what they're purveying does not add up, does not make sense when you look at it frame by frame.
Yeah, it's true. And wait till you see it. I mean, it's pretty convincing. There are several different views of the plane coming into the South Tower because all the cameras were trained on it at that time. And you definitely see a bulge under the plane on the starboard side of the plane, which is the right side of the plane. Now, that is been tested by a photographic an analyst expert from Spain, a woman, and we showed that analysis in that on that podcast. And she did a detailed analysis of the thing. I don't know if she got paid or what, but it's really there, And so what does that mean? Well, that means it wasn't a commercial flight. And that opens up a can of worms, right? Well, if it wasn't a commercial flight, okay, where were the passengers? All kinds of questions. What was the flash of light? Lots of argument and discussion over that. But as far as I'm concerned, the jury is in that was not a commercial flight because, as the pilots in plain sight say, it was not. They don't have that equipment. Those military have that equipment. Now, what was it
painted? What was it like doing? Civilian equipment, just like they said they'd do in Operation Northwoods in 1963 with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's then a chief executive officer died suddenly after he refused it. So there's that aspect. Yes. And for people playing at home, that would be a military aircraft in that hypothesis or that postulation that's painted to look like something that's a commercial airliner. Right. So there's that aspect to it. But it
wasn't that well painted either. According to several witnesses, it was a gray plane. And this video that came out very recently.
He says, yeah, you're right. That Brian's video, Kevin's video, it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah. It shows the plane from yet another similar, quite the same actually angle, but a different camera source. And it has yet to be analyzed. Some people think that it's dark, and some people think that, oh no, that's a United Airlines. In fact, it was identified by somebody in that crowd as a United Airlines plane. I haven't analyzed that. I just heard different sides of the argument.
Right. It's been, we covered it a couple of weeks ago when it first came out. I think it's like a honeypot. It's a Winnie the Pooh get his hand stuck in there if you put your nose too close to it. But from the fingerprint at the end with the 20-year release, because there was a 20-year embargo on the video you're watching, and then he plays a song that had a 20-year embargo on it.
It's even more disturbing than that. If you look at his graduation ceremony, there's a Jonathan Swift quote about like the plane, like the melting embers of metal, and also
the fingerprints of someone who might have worked on the other side of the operation. He has another, like he was a civilian.
Yeah, he has another video where he shows hypoxia, so pilot training and dealing with low oxygen environments. And I'm like, why would you show this? And then it's the strangest series of videos, because then my mind gets running. I'm like, well, does this mean that like it would be impossible to do those maneuvers, or like there's like what's going on? It's very strange. I agree with you. Honeypot or sort of a QAnon style situation got me a little bit concerned, but there's also some weird illusions in there that are hard to ignore.
Yeah, so that piece of recent footage aside, I remember talking to like Rob Balsamo, who runs Pilots for 9/11 Truth, and their work on it was demonstrating a number of things. One, a human pilot can't do that in the simulator. You can't do it in reality. Unlikely. And then an untrained pilot, no way.
That's what I've heard about as well.
And that most importantly, and from a structural engineering aspect, this is what resonated with me, because I had a lot of training in that, even though I didn't finish my degree in that. I got business degree. But those airliners are designed to fly at cruising altitude at that top speed. You cannot fly to low altitude at that top speed without structural failure. And you could not be precise so as to pick a building way off in the distance and drive that fast at it. It's not possible. So the story, the narrative was made up by people who don't understand physics, and the audience is a group of people who don't understand physics. And that's how these sort of public myths, like Philip Zelikow, that's what he did before he did the 9/11 commission. He worked on creating public myths.
Yeah.
This is the type of mythology that you've been breaking down now for how many years?
Too many. 15, I guess.
We need to get you a bigger hammer to chip at this wall.
I know it doesn't go very fast. This is hard, long sludge. We're in the trenches. It is. It doesn't seem to end. But you know what? If we quit, we'll never win.
It's like Sisyphus. If we quit, the boulder rolls down on us. So we got to keep pushing.
Yeah. And something's motivating us. Let's ask ourselves that question. What motivates us to keep pushing this boulder up the hill, other than the fact that it'll roll on us if we don't? We're driven by something deep inside ourselves, those of us who are awake in the 9/11 Truth movement and awake in the other movement that's exposing the underbelly of the COVID and its false solution set of issues. We are driven. We don't even know what drives us. We're in service to something much greater than ourselves, I think. And because I just keep getting the energy to go and go and go. I keep getting ideas to frame the evidence so that it's more precisely pinpointed, so that it can pierce the wall of denial in the media, the sleeping people, and our government. For instance, one of the things we're also very excited about is the film we're making, 9/11 Crime Scene to Courtroom. This has never been done. We're working together with the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, which I have joined the board of, and Mick Harrison, their litigation director, and I will be filmed in the courtroom with other experts also, presenting the evidence to a jury. And this evidence will also put the public in the seat of a juror and allow them to weigh the evidence and give us feedback as well.
Can you give me some examples of exhibits you might introduce at such a forum?
Yeah. then the grand jurors will see it, because we'll be submitting it to them in the form of a submittal to the original petition. So they'll have an opportunity to hear the 156 witnesses of explosions in the World Trade Center towers. I cite a couple of dozen of them in my presentation normally, but boom, 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 just like a controlled demolition when they try to take down buildings. Quotes like that. Quotes like, we felt the train run, like a train running underneath my feet. And I look up, and then the next thing we know, the building is collapsing. I heard a bright flash, and then there was a momentary delay before you could see the beginning of the collapse. Quote after quote after quote, describing precisely controlled demolition, seeing the collapse after all of these very specific sounds of explosions. So that's damning evidence. And then you have on top of that 36 reporters on the day of 9/11, the vast majority of them reporting the events as an explosion-based event, not a collapse due to fire, which came out the next day when all the experts were consulted, and from the top down in these federal agencies and private associations like the American Society of Civil Engineers, saying that it was a collapse due to weakening of steel and all that jet fuel, all this kind of stuff. So the jurors will be able to hear, see and hear point counterpoint, the NIST official explanation for something, and then the truth about what really happened, based on the science, not based on NIST's proclamations about what they call science. So we'll go back and forth with each set of evidence. The witnesses of explosions are only one of about 20 sets of evidence. We also have the extreme lateral ejection of freely flying structural steel sections weighing 8 tons, ejected laterally at 80 miles an hour, landing 600 feet in every direction. This doesn't happen in a structural collapse. And then we have the near free fall collapse of the Twin Towers, free fall in the case of Building 7, which means in the case of Building 7, not one of the 80 columns gave any resistance to the collapse whatsoever. Well, where did they go? And NIST even acknowledged that that would mean there'd be no structure there. But in the process of denying that there was free fall, then they had to admit it. So this was all proven. They were forced into it by David Chandler and Stephen Jones and other members of AE 9/11 Truth. So this is the jurors will see these glaring contradictions, also including the incredible heat produced by the Twin Towers, both in terms of during the collapse, where 10 times the volume of the building, we have these pyroclastic-like clouds coming out at 35 miles an hour in cauliflower-shaped forms, which is a clear indication, as we are told by the NFPA 921, the Guide for Fire and Explosion Investigations, to look for these things. So that heat indeed is evidenced in the pools of molten iron that are documented and denied by NIST again, but documented by first responders, FEMA, OSHA, other structural engineers. They go on and on. So they have temperatures exceeding 2,800 degrees that they document. Well, guess what? Fires only get to be about a quarter of those temperatures. Where did all this heat come from? Heat that melted steel, molten steel that we have in terms of flowing out of the buckets of the excavators that cannot be explained by office fires or jet fuel, which only burns at 600 Fahrenheit. So all these contradictions are what the jurors are going to see. Well, where did all that hot heat come from? We're going to be seeing then the evidence of thermite and nanothermite. Thermite's an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. So we have the evidence right there in the form of ignited thermite of the molten steel pouring out of the South Tower, for instance, 10 minutes prior to its collapse, the pools of molten iron dripping out of the buckets, and then also throughout all the World Trade Center dust. The EPA describes a signature element that it's not even World Trade Center dust unless it has all these molten iron microspheres, billions of them. Well, what does that mean? Molten iron is the byproduct of thermite. So these spheres, which are about the diameter of a human hair on average, are everywhere in all the dust, and they're completely unexplained in the detailed studies by the U.S. Geological Survey and by R.J. Lee. So an environmental consulting firm who did studies also. But so how would they get there? Well, you do an experiment with thermite in yourself. You ignite it with a very hot temperature, and the thermite is iron oxide, which is essentially rust, and aluminum pieces mixed up. And there's an incredible incendiary, high heat, 4,000 degree temperatures. And what's produced? Molten iron microspheres. So we know where they came from. It's very clear. In fact, we only have to look at the body of the blanket of dust throughout lower Manhattan, 3 inches thick concrete powder, pulverized, all those floors pulverized to a fine powder. We look in there, and the team of 8 international scientists led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen finds red-gray chips in all these independently collected samples that were sent to them for analysis. They do,
and these chips are colored on one side. They're like rust colored on one side, and then like aluminum on the other.
Yeah, exactly. They thought it was paint because they're dual layered. They're obviously fluid applied. So, but they analyze it and they find the ingredients of thermite in there. What's that doing? Through an X-ray energy dispersive spectroscopy. But then they zoom in 50,000 times, and what do they find? Nanoparticles of iron oxide and aluminum powder, which should not be there at all. But these are the diameter of a human. These are 1,000 times smaller than the diameter of human hair. Nanoparticles, and they're set in this bed of oxygen, silica, carbon. This is extremely sophisticated material, which that stuff is gas expansion, organic material, which provides the gas expansion in.
So probably not made by the box cutter guys, is what you're saying.
No, it's very sophisticated. We know where we can go to find this. This is all documented, by the way, in a peer-reviewed paper in the Bentham Open Chemical Physics Journal. It's not been even challenged by any other peer-reviewed paper. This is back in 2009. We've had this. We've brought it to Congress. We've brought it to the media. They just ignore it. We've got foul representatives who are not doing us any favors. And if they're good, they don't want to touch it because it's a political third rail for them. They'll be called a conspiracy theorist like the rest of us. B, more likely, I think in most cases, they're part of the problem. And I can't prove that. I think you can with all of the brain diagrams that you've done. They got to lead to those guys.
Foul is a nice euphemism for it. I'll just say we could use much more choice words there. So
hey, I also wanted to touch on, I didn't remember this until like a couple minutes ago, but I interviewed, or my buddy John Massari and I interviewed a NIST whistleblower for you guys. Do you remember that guy, Peter?
Peter Ketchum.
Ketchum, that's his last name.
And
All right.
it's on YouTube. Stand for Truth.
All right. So he's like a mathematician type. He's nerdy, smart guy with math and these sort of things. He's working at NIST. And then the NIST report comes out. He knew nothing about like the investigation, but he reads the report afterwards. And so I remember the one question I asked him was, what percentage of the NIST model came from actual evidence at the scene? He's like, none. They made the model independently of the evidence at the scene. I was like, that's it. That's all. That's basically all you need to understand, is that they made a model at NIST to suit their predetermined narrative, and it had nothing to do with the evidence at the scene. Another interesting thing, I don't know. Did you know the guy who had the location where we filmed him? Was that your hookup?
What are we talking about?
Okay, so Peter Ketchum, we filmed him in Brooklyn. We filmed him at the offices of a multiple Academy Award winner, no, Emmy Award maybe, winner named John Kirby. He made a film that I was very familiar with, American Ruling Class.
Yeah.
So in talking with him while we were setting up for the interview, we had gone out to lunch and we're having this discussion and we're talking about the deep state and East India Company. And I'm kind of like, hey, how do you know this? I know how I know this. He goes, my dad was a Rhodes Scholar. And I was like, shut the front door. No, he's a very nice guy, very smart, very, very smart guy. Had a great library in his office. That's where we filmed Peter Ketchum. And yeah, so those are good times. It's been a couple years though.
Yeah, yeah.
The NIST whistleblower.
You had done that.
I get around.
Yeah.
I don't make a big deal about it. That's all.
You sure do. And he's well spoken. That's an important DVD for everybody. In fact, that's a really good one to play during our breaks. We're going to have 3 30-minute breaks in this 12-hour day. So it's like we're not just going to be exhausting everybody without mercy. So we'll play that video during the break. But
in fact, after we're departed from you at the end of this, LD, would you bring up on my Vimeo, just search NIST and you'll find the Peter Ketchum, like it's 30 seconds, but it has the GoPro angle. So you can see the whole room, the setup, who's there. We're all filming them. It was a good time, but I want to show that to the audience after Richard leaves us.
Oh, yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to point was the best research that I could help you tie some of this stuff together that goes beyond like my personal experience. This guy, Jeremy Reese, he goes by Alien Scientist.
Oh yeah,
YouTube.
Jeremy. Yeah.
For years, he's been Johnny on the spot. And there was like one video he made. I'm like, he nailed it. And then he makes this longer, deeper video with more. I'm like, that. Yeah, he nailed it even more. So it's like he's just nailing like nails in the coffin of these people.
He's got hundreds of pages of analysis too. I mean, we had him on the show.
All those companies that made all the different parts to do the whole effect of the thing that we see. So yeah, there's a lot more to be learned, and I want to see more people learn about these things so they don't happen again.
Yeah, really. That's the other thing that drives us. We expose the truth about 9/11, and guess what? People. Well, first of all, we show them Building 7. It is an obvious controlled demolition, looks exactly like one. There was no examples of any other previous collapse by fire in a steel framed high rise until that day.
There were 2 others right before that one, but that's the only one where they said it was going to fall down before it fell down. They read the script ahead of time.
What's strange is how they try to explain that, because I guess the column was on fire in the background. They're like, well, this would create a structural or compromise the structural integrity. And I was laughing because I'm like, see, you don't see it from this angle. This is what the conspiracy theorists show you. But you look at this angle, I'm like, but that wouldn't be enough. Even if that were the case, just like with the supposed jet fuel that compromised the integrity of the steel columns, you wouldn't get the near free fall speed. Where did all that extra heat come from? To your point, I mean, it's to Mr. Gage's point. I mean, there's all these contradictions and extra questions that need to be asked based on that. That doesn't make any sense, because you wouldn't get exactly as Mr. Gage has said, a perfect free fall, or not free fall. But,
and is the BBC
controlled? It is free fall, but controlled demolition style. Because you look at other controlled, if you juxtapose that to other controlled demolitions, it looks exactly like that. Whereas because of the sort of what happened with the planes, we'll just use that for now on the 9, and the sort of like the crippling or sort of like crimpling, if you will, of the tower as it falls. Both towers as they fall, like people sort of they can get mystified by it for it. But when you look at building 7 is fully structured. There's no holes in it, so to speak, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So when you can juxtapose that to a controlled demolition, it looks 1-to-1, like a complete congruency between the two. And that's where it's just like, it's become obvious. Now, if that column that's on fire for all those hours that they say will compromise the integrity of the structure, it wouldn't fall in that manner. It's not like that is like the cornerstone of the entire structure from which you'll get a free fall controlled demolition like experience. It doesn't make any sense. Like if anything, it would sort of buckle and then sort of like fall in on itself, or sort of go like pieces of it would fall in.
It would do something else inconvenient to their plan.
And everybody gets
property,
that.
And then there'd be an investigation.
It's common sense, right? I'm not a physicist. I'm just a logic professor. Like I can see the contradictions.
A 7th grader can get it.
Right.
A child can get it.
Right.
Well, so we take that and we start with that, because that opens minds. We don't have the emotional trauma relative to building 7 that we do with the Twin Towers.
Right.
So
absolutely.
People, once they see this, they go, oh no, that wasn't fire that destroyed that building. They know they've been lied to, right? So already their belief structure in their government, which is like, as a child, your parents, they're infallible. They can't do anything wrong. You can't afford to believe that they could abuse you or your family. They're almost perfect, and it's a matter of psychological survival. But we show them building 7, and it begins to crack, and then we go to the Twin Towers, and once we have the building 7 platform ready for us, we can show them the Twin Towers. Now 9/11 then falls. Once 9/11 falls, and that's what happened for me in 2006 when David Ray Griffin I heard him on the radio, and I'd never heard any alternative theory about this at all. And so here's my world breaking apart. I mean, it was extremely uncomfortable. You described some of this in your experiences too, Richard. It's like, no, because that would mean, no, I'm not going there. That would mean that the media lied to us across the board, around the world. That would mean that the 500 representatives in Congress lied to us. Not to mention the Bush administration, which I was already a little bit, although I was a Reagan Republican, I wanted to go and get those bastards that did this to us in Afghanistan, of all places, and Iraq, of all places.
And to your point, real quick, these lies are spread all around the world by the media, by our government, and it's very easy. People are like, how do they do that? I'm like, it's very easy. They don't know the truth, and then they're told a story and they repeat it. That's basically it. Yep. So it's not like they're all in on it, twisting their mustache.
No,
they're in the dark. CNN and AP and White House said this. That's what they tell people.
And everyone wants a solution and narrative as quickly as possible, so they can at least put it in, so they can file it in some sort of filing system in their mind. It gives them some sort of continuity to go about their day. It's a psychological sort of warfare trick that's being played on the public.
And the newscasters are not journalists. They're just reading a script. It all comes down from the top. And then you, Richard, have established how high the top is in some measure. These are not independently operating corporations in the media and the arms industry, the oil industry, and the insurance industry and the banking industry. Sonoma State Project Censored has reevaluated this and found that they're all interlocking. The same boards of directors sit on all of these, and so they're controlled from the top down. And they are finding this out is just extremely disturbing, because how can you win against that? They have the money, they have the guns, they have the power, and the control of us. So we need to start thinking about where is our hope in all of this. And, it's not me speaking to 100 or 1,000 people, as I've done many, 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 many times, because that's not mushrooming like it needs to. It's not me reaching 1 million people on coast to coast radio like I've done in other large radio stations. It's not just that. So, but I can't stop. I've made 6 films already. We're on our 7th, and I keep having hope that, the next project will be the one that breaks it, but maybe it's not something that's going to actually break down the structure with a particular effort. 8911 Truth just made Unspeakable, which is a heartwarming side. It doesn't get into the evidence, but it opens hearts and gives you a real insight into these 4 victims' family members who have been crying out for justice for 20 years now. That is a piece of the answer also, but not all of it. I don't have the crystal ball. I don't know what else to do. You've done the yeoman's work of the brain diagrams, Richard, and I was deeply impressed when I saw that interactive software. I hope you'll tell everybody about that.
Hey, I was just thinking, you had said interlock. So I already had this thought in mind before you said that, but I wanted to show you the history blueprint for a second, just because this map that might have things like the aircraft piracy protocols being changed right before the event, and these sort of things.
Exercise.
This is inspired by an artist named Mark Lombardi, who while I was doing research, I'm putting all this stuff together, and my buddy comes over. He says, I just saw an art exhibit in New York City where this guy has these huge wall-sized murals, and it's circles and lines. And when you go up to it, it's like George W. Bush gets money from James Bath, who got it from Salim bin Laden, and here's Osama bin Laden. And I was like, great, I want to meet this guy. I want to talk to him. He goes, oh, you can't. He died last year.
Yeah.
2 years ago, right before 9/11. And the artwork is all held. Right, it's all held by the Whitney Museum and stuff, from the Whitney Skull and Bones opium family. Of course,
you preserved that, I think, in what you've been missing. One of your earliest productions. I became aware of it before I met you, like over 10 years ago now.
So his book is called Global Networks. It's published by the Judith Rothschild Foundation. I can't make this up. And the book about him is called Interlock, like the life of Mark Lombardi. And there's also a good German documentary. But the ideas that I started putting into an interactive model for my edification, but also for self-preservation, because Lombardi's was all done on these pieces of paper that could only be shown in the museum. I wanted something that was interactive and that people could click into. It had the resources and references attached to it. So it was like taking that initial idea, plus all this information that I had to organize, plus using that software to make it available to other people. And I've sold that model for, I don't know, almost 15 years now. Since 2008.
It's powerful. I just became aware of it myself, and I need to find time. That's the problem for me now. It's a huge problem is time, because that you put how many hours into that? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
I just disciplined myself to, when I was learning, I would capture it so I could reuse it later, as opposed to opening a bunch of tabs and losing them, because that's what we all usually do every day. So I just kind of systematized to get rid of that entropy. And that's my engineering background, always seeking to reduce that entropy.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible. We got to get it out there. I want to put it on my website. If you can help me to figure out the best format to do that, we'll make an article at a minimum about it and put the live software on there so people can learn more, because I'm unleashed now. And that's the kind of stuff that I can put out there. I don't know how long my rope is. But I can have other experts talk about most anything that will be helpful in waking up people.
Well, that's good. I'm looking forward to seeing these the evidence and the exhibits in the courtroom kind of thing unfold for the grand jury. But I'm even more excited because it's next week. The 9/11 con, Pentagon. Is it called the Pentagon Con?
No, that was the name of a piece of work by the Citizens Investigation Team. 9/11 Con.
Look at that synchronicity. 9/11 Con.
Yeah.
Next weekend, March 18th. Is that the correct?
19, March 19th, Saturday, all day.
Right. 4 presenters. And where do people get their reserve their seat?
Go to richardgage911.org and follow your nose. You'll find it.
I tested it out earlier today. You do find it. You get a nice confirmation. It's well thought out. Everything you have going on is professional, as we would expect. Heretofore, it was this big organization, bureaucracy, red tape. Now you're solo. You're traveling light. You can talk to who you want. You can say your opinions. You can interview people, collect data and information. And I'm interested in seeing who else you're going to be interviewing this topic, because I continue to learn about it just about every day with what's going on in the world. You learn the history of people taking action today. Oh, they were in Iran-Contra. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, there's a long history of these covert actions. It's a finite planet. There's only so many people interested in this type of thing. Globalism, internationalism, usurping American sovereignty. So,
well, your work, Mr. Gage, it's been invaluable. If nothing else, whether we see actionable change even within our own lifetimes, it's important as a sort of time capsule preservation for later generations to be aware of what can happen with bureaucratic and sort of government systems and how they become tyrannical over time and how much they can abuse people's trust and value.
And I think you have enough punches in your repertoire, because it's not just World Trade Center 7. You're like Towers 1 and 2. And then you're like, and then they're all insured by the same guy and they paid them, and you just knock them out right there. It's like, it wasn't insurance fraud par excellence. It was like the guy got paid
on top of the physics.
After he arranged those special policies before the event as different, you know,
right before. Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
I say we just pull it. All right. Richard Gage, Unleashed. Thank you so much. And anyone who hasn't seen it, go check out my interview with him from last week on his platform. He needs the clicks. He needs the likes. Go ahead and subscribe, click that bell, do all those good things. And also follow him on any other Freedom Outposts you might see him on. He's got a Substack. And Richard, it's been a real pleasure. I'll talk to you again soon. I want to talk about these financial connections and what you've learned by the time next time I talk to you.
Right on. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate this.
You take care, guys.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.